like most people, I've written Dereck Chisora off a number of times in the past, particularly after the Caballel fight. At that point, to me, it looked as though Dereck Chisora had lost his fighting spirit and that he had resigned himself to becoming a journeyman who would just be fodder for upcoming heavyweights. But he picked himself up, dusted himself off, and had that tremendous win over Carlos Takam, who at the time was still a viable world-level heavyweight contender. I thought that Takam was going to beat the brakes off Dereck Chisora, and to be fair, he did kind of beat the brakes off Dereck Chisora until Chisora landed that monumental right hand that turned the fight on its head, and the follow-up right hand which ended the fight. So I was amazed at how Dereck Chisora was able to win that fight. Then he went into the Dillian Whyte rematch. He hooked up with David Haye. He got himself in tremendous condition. And although he got knocked clean out in the in the Dillian Whyte rematch, he came back last weekend and knocked out Artur Szpilka, who, let's be fair, Artur Szpilka's kind of on his way out too. But Dereck Chisora didn't look like a man who had resigned himself to journeyman status. He still looked like a man with ambition. And the reason why I've written Dereck Chisora off so many times, and he's proven me wrong so many times, is because most fighters in Dereck Chisora's position who have lost 9 fights, and some of those defeats have been devastating defeats, like the knockout defeat to David Haye, the defeat to Dillian Whyte second time around, the listless performance against Ajit Caballel. Some of these defeats have been decisive. And most fighters who have been through all the stuff that Dereck Chisora has been through, 9 losses, 3 times by knockout, most fighters in that position, they do resign themselves to journeyman status. They do fade away into obscurity. They don't manage to keep on resurrecting themselves and reinventing themselves. No, most fighters in Chisora's position can't do that. And I'm talking about even top-level fighters, world championship fighters. I've seen guys who were world champions and they get knocked out in devastating fashion once and they're never the same again. So it's you can be forgiven for writing somebody like Dereck Chisora off because his ability to keep coming back and dusting himself off and going again and retaining his ambition and his fighting spirit and his, warrior mentality, his ability to do that is very uncommon in boxing. He really is a throwback, actually, and he likes that throwback role. If you go back to the 1920s, some of the top contenders would lose fights. 2 weeks later, they're back in the ring and they get a win. To them, winning and losing wasn't a big deal. It was the fight game. You win some, you lose some. But just because they lost last week, it don't mean they can't fight next week and win in a world title fight. That's the kind of mentality they had. Some of the fighters anyway, all right? There was plenty of fighters back there who got ruined. But the ones who were the mentally toughest, they ended up like the Chisoras of the world, where they could get knocked out in their last fight. The next fight, they come back, they knock out a world champion and win a title. Chisora obviously hasn't done that. But you get the point I'm trying to make here. The kind of dogged determination that Dereck Chisora has, the confidence really, is uncommon in boxing. It's uncommon. And so now we look forward to the next phase of Dereck Chisora's career. The end could be right around the corner. We don't know where his punch resistance is at following the devastating knockout defeat to Dillian Whyte. He took a few shots from Artur Szpilka, but Szpilka is not a noted puncher, all right? In the first round of the Dillian Whyte rematch, Dereck Chisora got wobbled with a right hand, but that's not the first time he's been wobbled in the first round of a fight. He got wobbled in the first round against Robert Helenius many years ago. He was wobbled. God, there was another fight where he got wobbled early. I can't remember which it was. But he was also wobbled against, was it Gerber? It was either Edmund Gerber or Parler. One of those guys wobbled him as well. He's been wobbled early in fights before. So there could be a situation where Chisora is just more susceptible early, to being caught cold when he hasn't warmed up to taking the shots. But at the same time, anybody who's been following boxing for decades, you'll definitely have noticed that certain fighters, when they suffer devastating knockout defeats, subsequently, their punch resistance appears to be severely affected by the devastating knockout that they suffered. We have to see if that's the case with Dereck Chisora. But I like the intensity that he has in his work. He's clearly turning his punches over better now than he ever has before. I'd like to see him a bit lighter, I've been talking a lot about weight and fighters gaining muscle and stuff like that and being quite critical of it. And I've had a few insecure bodybuilders turn up in the comment section of some of my videos and try and, have a go at me or cast doubt over what I'm saying because they're insecure bodybuilders. They're guys who go to the gym, probably look at magazines full of men wearing G-strings all day long, weirdo stuff like that. And they hear me saying that putting on excess muscle, like 15, 20 pounds of muscle, is actually going to be detrimental to your performance in the ring. And they turn up in a comment section talking a whole heap of nonsense, saying, oh, I've still got good stamina and I lift all the time. No, you don't have good stamina. Yeah. Throughout the decades that I've been involved in boxing, as an amateur for many years, helping train fighters in a boxing gym for many years, I've seen numerous times big bodybuilder dudes come into the gym and they want to spar and they get slapped around like Tina Turner. Facts. I've seen guys who shouldn't be heavyweights because they've put so much muscle on themselves. They've pumped themselves full of steroids and whatnot. Probably if they were their natural weight, they'd be a light heavyweight. But they've pumped themselves up with weights to be heavyweights. Come down the gym, think they can box a little bit, get in the ring. I've seen guys get cleaned out by middleweights. Guys who weigh 230, 240 pounds get cleaned out by middleweights. And when I say cleaned out, I'm talking about knocked out. All that excess muscle is not going to help you in a boxing ring. In MMA or something like that, it might be a bit more advantageous. But in a boxing ring, we're not talking about throwing your silly little pity-patty punches when you're hitting the pads or when you're hitting the bag. We're talking about punches that are actually going to be effective against an opponent who knows what they're doing, who's at a good level, who's not intimidated by your muscles, somebody who's far too experienced for that. Your little pity-patty, See, most of these big weightlifters, they come in the boxing gym, they can't even punch. I'm telling you. Most of them can't punch. Certainly not punch their weight because the muscle actually restricts your movement. And some of them can punch, but most of them can't punch. Even Manny Stewart talked about this. Most of them can't really punch because they can't articulate the body and get the rotation, and they don't have the flexibility and the snap on their shots that you need to really be able to punch your weight. But anyway, enough of the insecure bodybuilders. I'm sure some of them will turn up in the comment section of this one. You don't have the stamina. You don't have the flexibility. You'll get slapped around like Tina Turner if you step in a ring with somebody who can actually fight, who can actually box. That's what will happen to you. Running around with your muscles and taking all your selfies on Insta. Nonsense. Real fighters don't spend their day all day in the weights room. They spend a day in the boxing gym. All right. Anyway, Dereck Chisora, he's put on this extra muscle, but he's also retained a lot of body fat. Let's be real. In the Dillian Whyte fight, there was extra muscle, but he was leaner. In the fight against Spilka, he gained muscle, but there's also a bit of fat gone back on. If Chisora is going to be viable against the more fleet-footed heavyweights out there, like an Usyk, like a Deontay Wilder, like any of the top guys who have got foot speed, Chisora is going to need to drop a lot of weight. So the fat or the muscle or a combination of the two have to come down a bit. I thought Dereck Chisora actually looked a bit tight in the Dillian Whyte rematch. So even though he was aesthetically in the best shape I've seen him look, he looked a bit tight, In the Spilka fight, to be fair, he didn't look as tight. He looked a little looser. He still looked, a little clunky, but not too bad. Yeah. And obviously the punches that put Spilka away. Tremendous punches. We don't have currently in the heavyweight division anybody in the top 10 who reminds you, is reminiscent of a Joe Frazier or a Mike Tyson stylistically. We don't have anybody who fills that role. I mean, some people might say Povetkin, but Povetkin is a bit more of a clean boxer than those guys, Mike Tyson was an all-out pressure fighter. Joe Frazier was an all-out pressure fighter. Povetkin will box with you a little bit, I mean, some might say Andy Ruiz, but again, not really. Ruiz is a front foot counterpuncher. He's not really a guy who applies relentless pressure and, keeps you under the cosh at all times. That's not really Ruiz's game. Joe Frazier was like that. Relentlessly coming forward, putting it on you, letting the hands fly at all times. Same with Mike Tyson. Although Mike Tyson was more a guy who would punch in bursts, but still, he would lead off a plenty as well as countering. And the excitement, the intensity that he brought to the ring was palpable. We don't have anybody like that in the top 10 in the heavyweight division. Dereck Chisora, in flashes, in very short bursts, he has it. Yeah. In very short bursts, he has the Joe Frazier head movement where he's dipping and rolling underneath shots and then coming up with hooks. And he obviously worked with his previous trainer, Don Charles, on the Joe Frazier type style. Particularly earlier on in Chisora's career, his head movement was very reminiscent of Joe Frazier. Yeah, Joe Frazier had very distinctive head movement. And as I say, Chisora's was reminiscent of that. Can he put it all together in one fight and turn over one of the major names in the top 10? That's the question I'm asking. Can Dereck Chisora be some kind of upset king? Now, I don't think Chisora is going to go on to be, the best fighter in the division or anything even close to that. But does he have an Oliver McCall moment in him? When Oliver McCall knocked out Lennox Lewis? Because Oliver McCall was openly described in the boxing press at the time as a journeyman, as was Buster Douglas before he beat Mike Tyson. These guys were described as journeymen. I mean, both of them had multiple losses on their records below world championship level. Can Dereck Chisora have an Oliver McCall moment, a Buster Douglas moment? Maybe not where he beats the champion, but where he beats one of the top contenders who is expected to deal with him without too much issues. That's what I'm wondering, because as I said earlier on in the video, this is a guy whose ability to dust himself off is uncommon. Even among the top level fighters, most of them don't have the mental strength to be able to continuously dust themselves off and come back and get wins and, decent wins. The likes of Artur Spilka, the likes of Carlos Takam. These are decent wins, man, especially the Takam win. So, who should Dereck Chisora fight next? That's another question I have to ask you guys. I asked it in my Facebook boxing group. And by the way, There's a lot of people asking what happened to my Facebook boxing group. It got deleted by Facebook. I'm not going to explain it here. I'd explain it if you join my new group, Hatman Boxing Brotherhood. But I'm being a lot more discerning about who I let in the new group. I'm not just letting in every Tom, Dick, and Harry. I'm being a bit more selective. But still, yeah, the old boxing group that had 20,000 members, Facebook deleted it. It is what it is. But I asked a couple people in there who they think Dereck Chisora should fight next. And some of the suggestions were David Price, obviously Joseph Parker, because that's what Eddie Hearn is looking at. Other people said they'd like to see Dereck Chisora fight Alexander Povetkin. There were some saying they'd like to see him fight Oscar Rivas. I mean, all of those are good suggestions as far as I'm concerned. Because with Dereck, and I just got done watching one of Boxing Beats and Rhymes videos where he was talking about Dereck. In fact, he was doing the live commentary for the Chisora-Spilka fight. And he said that Chisora has been a great servant to British boxing. He really has. You know, the British boxing fans love Chisora because he is an insufferable trier. You know, this guy will try and try and try and try. And whenever he's in, you know, a fight which is supposed to be dangerous or supposed to be competitive, it's not supposed to be a gimme for him. Whenever he's in that kind of fight, he always shows up. It's when you put him in a fight where he's not really up for it. He doesn't feel any threat from the opponent. It's kind of supposed to be a gimme. It's people expect him to win, like the Caballel fight. That's where he doesn't show up. But when you put him in a fight, which is supposed to be a real fight, and you put him on at the O2, because he loves that venue at the O2, he turns up. He throws big punches. He tries his best. And the British public have really responded well to that. You know, they love Dereck Chisora, the British boxing fans, because they're going to get value for money from this man every time. Just because he got knocked out the last fight, he'll come back and he'll have a go in his next fight. And he'll have a real go. So, yeah, he is a value for money fan favorite who is kind of an institution in British boxing. Definitely a warhorse. I think that's the way Boxing Beats and Rams described him. He is the quintessential warhorse. And yeah, I think all of those fights that people mention are good fights from a stylistic point of view and even from a ranking point of view. Because if Dereck Chisora wants to get a second shot at the world heavyweight title, and by the way, that isn't necessarily a goal of Dereck Chisora's. If you've ever listened to what he said in interviews, he doesn't make out as though, you know, winning world titles is necessarily at the top of his list of priorities. He's more interested in just being in good fights and making good money. That doesn't necessarily mean fighting for a title. In some cases it could, but in other cases, you know, he can shrug his shoulders and be easy. If he can make similar money in a non-title fight, he'll go for that. And Chisora is just a guy who loves fighting in general. It's the actual act of getting in there and fighting and giving the fans entertainment that Chisora thrives off. That's why he keeps doing this. The money and the fact that he likes the buzz of giving the fans entertainment. So many professional fighters over the years have spoken about how boxing is addictive. You can get addicted to the buzz. And Chisora seems to be addicted to the buzz, you know. Hopefully he don't go on for too long, because we don't want to see, you know, too many other fighters end up with pugilistic dementia. But as of right now, he still seems as though he might have a couple big efforts left in him. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Who would you like to see Chisora in there with? Joseph Parker, Povetkin, Rivas, Price, a Takam rematch? Let me know. I mean, I even saw some people say a Dylan White third fight. In fact, I think it was Gareth Davis, wasn't it? That said a third fight with Dylan White and Chisora. He mentioned that at the White Rivas post-fight press conference, and Dylan White said that's a stupid question. So, yeah, I mean, another guy was Usyk, I think I mentioned before. Would Usyk fancy that as his first fight at heavyweight? Easy fight to make. They're both with Matchroom. And Dereck Chisora's knockout of Spilka was on DAZN. Spilka's a former Wilder opponent. So I think there'd be a decent amount of interest stateside for Alexander Usyk versus Dereck Chisora. Obviously, Chisora is being brought into that fight. If that fight happens, he's being brought into that fight as the opponent. He's being brought into that fight to lose. But with the KO of Spilka and with all the people that Chisora has been in the ring with, from David Haye to Vitaly Klitschko to Tyson Fury a couple of times to Dylan White, etc., they might be able to sell it. Usyk versus Chisora. But will Usyk want that smoke? Will he prefer to go with somebody like Takam? I mean, Takam might be even more of a risky fight for Usyk just because of the power of these guys. I know many of the cruiserweights that Usyk fought had power, but it's the physical strength combined with the power at heavyweight. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about everything I've talked about in this video. Dereck Chisora, he has an uncanny and uncommon ability to keep rebounding from defeats and maintain his fighting spirit and his love for the sport. Who should he fight next? Drop it below. Let's happen them out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.